Oh, what a week it was in college volleyball. Welcome back to another episode of Six Rotations. He's Mick Haley, national champion head coach of USC and Texas. I'm Daniel Gillman. Happy to be with you. And Mick, if you could just, I don't know if you know the number yet. If you just want to guess off the top, and you guys listening at home too, how many ranked teams do you think lost in the last 7 days? What's a good guess?
From me,
Yeah.
7 or 8.
12.
Oh my
12
gosh.
of the top 25 teams lost this past week. We are so excited for another episode breaking down the AVCA Coaches Poll. It is a unique poll, Mick. Nobody at the top is named Nebraska, Wisconsin, Stanford, Texas. No, we've got a great surprise coming for you as the number one team. As always, we're brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. So 12 top 25 teams lost this past week. 5 of them lost to unranked teams. Nebraska fell to SMU early in the week on ESPNU. Texas lost to Miami at the end of this week after losing to Minnesota in 5 to start the week. Florida fell to USF in 5 sets, but without their 2-star players. Florida State, who had just burst into the top 20, they lost to Auburn. And then Marquette finished a tough 0-3 week, getting upset by Western Michigan. Parity all over the place. We are so stoked to bring it to you. And what I want to do this time, Mick, we're going to shake up the order for you. I want to bring the top 10 into picture right away so that we can break them down first. I think we'll start doing it this way, and then we'll open it up to the rest. But taking a look at it, the Pittsburgh Panthers, with 29 first place votes, become the AVCA's number one team for the first time in their program's history, as Pitt, Stanford, and then Penn State, they've got their own claim for the number one spot. All three are undefeated at the top of the rankings. Penn State with a dominant win over Louisville, Mick, and we'll start with them, the Nittany Lions. They swept Louisville on Tuesday, 25-15 in that first set. Cameron Hanna was pretty solid with 8 kills, 1 error, and then Cameron Hanna goes insane in a reverse sweep over Kentucky. She picks up 22 kills. Taylor Trammell with 12 kills. The 2 transfers dominated, and we didn't know what we were going to get from Penn State, and they have certainly come to play to start the season.
Yeah, I think I was a little bit wrong about Penn State, but I think Izzy Stark makes a big difference. The setter, the freshman setter, I really think she makes them click, and she is a gunslinger. She has no fear, and she lays it out there for those hitters. So I think Penn State is for real. I'm not sure they're a top 4 team yet, but they certainly could be by the end of the season. Just depends on how they develop, but they certainly had a good week, huh?
No doubt about it. Meanwhile, Pitt swept through Oregon. That was back on August 30th, so they had a bit of an off week. They played Buffalo on Tuesday, so you could say they kind of backed their way into the number one spot, but they will certainly have to defend it on Wednesday, as they have to go to USC, take on the Trojans on Wednesday, and then travel to Pepperdine on Friday night. Back that up by traveling to Santa Barbara on Saturday, and then next week hosting Penn State. So that is an awesome schedule for Pittsburgh to try to earn this number one spot. Meanwhile, Louisville at 4 had a tough loss, still looking like a dominant team that took down Wisconsin early in the season on that opener, and then Nebraska at 5. What are you thinking about this top 5 here? We are going to get Creighton at Nebraska coming up on Tuesday, a matchup of 5 versus 9 in Lincoln to highlight what is going to be a great Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday slate this week. We'll talk about in a second.
Well, I think Nebraska got penalized for that loss at SMU a little bit more than maybe some of the other people. I had them a little bit higher, like 3 at this point, until they do something else. But Louisville also lost on the road. So, those two, Louisville did not get penalized quite as much as Nebraska did. I think Nebraska is actually ahead of Louisville at this point, at least talent-wise. But that's all right. They're all in the top 5, and they're just going to beat each other up for a while.
Yeah. Meanwhile, when you take a look at kind of what Stanford has done, the big sweep over Marquette over the weekend, looking very, very smooth in the way that we're seeing that that Cammy Minor offense moving. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in this top 10, isn't there? And I think one key figure here, and something that I'm pretty excited about, is seeing this Creighton-Nebraska matchup, because I don't know if you watched on FS1, Creighton versus USC. What did you see from that? Because Creighton, extra points in the fourth set, certainly a very even matchup. 17 kills. Norris continues to be a dominant performer. Ava Martin picked up 16 kills as well. Are we thinking the Blue Jays are kind of the aggressors right now in the mid majors of the top 10 or top 15?
Well, in the mid majors, their offense is very good. They produced close to 18 points per set. They hit at a very high percentage. What bothered me about Creighton is they had 10.5 gives per set against USC. They won that match because USC had 12.5 gives back. So basically, USC gave back 2 more points than Creighton did. And if you look at the scores of the game, um, yeah, it was pretty good win for Creighton, but boy, USC could have won. They just cut down their errors, and they're in that match at Creighton. So I think Creighton, while their offense is clicking, they got some good arms. They have to shore up their defense and their errors, and then we'll see. But for sure, they can compete offensively with a lot of the teams.
All right, Mick, walk us through the Texas Longhorns. Number 6 right now in the top 25 poll, a drop from 1 to 6. It was an unbelievable match against Minnesota, but then you go up 2-0 at home against Miami. Do you feel like there was a bit of a let up in a game where you feel like maybe it was going to be a cakewalk, and then all of a sudden Grace Lopez goes off for 20 kills? The Hurricanes dominated the 5th set and pick up their marquee win.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't feel that. In fact, Texas could have won 3-0. It was that close in the third set. And you have to give Miami credit. First of all, they made some changes in their lineup. They switched liberos. They brought in a German kid on the left side who really got them going. And they played very good volleyball. In fact, they have about 5 foreign athletes starting for them that it's really fun team to watch. And they hit the jump serve extremely well. They have a left-hander that curves the ball to the right, and most of the people have been watching right-handers that curve the ball to the left on the jump serve. So that caused Texas passing some problems. But once Miami got the momentum going in the fourth set, then Texas started doing some strange things. They kept switching their setters. They took themselves out of the rhythm. Winnis did not have a good match at all from start to finish, so they were left with just Skinner being their primary producer, and either they haven't figured out how to set Rutherford yet to get the points, or Rutherford is still not comfortable in her new team, the Longhorns, yet. But they take her out in the back row, so she's not a point producer in the front row, only in the front row, but not the back row. So I thought Texas had some problems scoring, a few too many errors, and then their lineup's not set. They don't seem to know exactly what they think their best lineup is. So I don't think we're going to see the real Texas until they get that straightened out. They just can't seem to make up their mind and go with one setter or go with two setters or whatever they're going to do.
Well, you don't have a lot of time to turn things around, because a tough matchup on ESPN on Sunday against Stanford. That's going to be a doubleheader on ESPN Sunday starting at 1 o'clock. Creighton and Louisville. How about that week for Creighton? You take on Nebraska and Louisville, a pair of Final Four teams from a season ago, and then Texas, Stanford. I'm very excited for that. Meanwhile, Creighton, Nebraska Tuesday. We talked about that. Arizona State and Nebraska on Friday. That's going to be a lot of fun as well. Let's talk about the Huskers. They elect to go with Taylor Landfair in the starting lineup on Tuesday. SMU with a record crowd of over 6,500 fans, an epic comeback, down 21 to 16 to take that first set, Mick. But then the second set was dominant. Third set as well, 25-18. And it was the Gator transfer, Nadie Okamore, who had 9 blocks, including the biggest late, that gave Sam Erger, the former Baylor assistant coach, who's now the very young and very well-regarded head coach of SMU. That's a team that is right on the outside looking in right now, and the ACC is just growing and growing with Miami and SMU and Florida State and all of these teams that are starting to grow up that bubble to add to the top 3 or 4. What did you were you able to watch some of that SMU Nebraska?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing,
All right, break it down.
I also watched SMU lose then the weekend to LMU, which is I couldn't understand any way, shape, or form. But the match was really strange. Nebraska is playing on the road, great crowd at SMU, which is nice to see. SMU is into volleyball, and everybody wants to come and play in Dallas. So everybody wants to play TCU or SMU. You know why? Because the best recruits in the country are hanging out all over Dallas, and they want to get in there and show their stuff. Well, Nebraska got in there and they didn't show their stuff. In fact, they started Landfair, as you said, but she was only in there for a very short time. They went back. They went back with their other starting lineup, and they just never really took control. But Beeson must have been listening to our podcast the week before, because I had said Beeson's got to start going off. She went off. She was really good, but guess what? She was the only one that was really good. No one else for Nebraska could really bring it. They had trouble in the backcourt, something unusual with ball control. They didn't pass well. They just never were in the match. I just never felt like Nebraska was in the match. SMU seemed to dominate right from the start. And so everybody got excited about SMU. They got excited about themselves. And guess what? LMU shows up 3-2 LMU.
That's just this beauty of the sport. You can never get too high or you'll be humbled. Meanwhile, a team that started the season pretty humbled was Wisconsin. They had a pair of wins, their first 2 wins down in Texas that were they were barn burners, to say the least, for Coach Sheffield. A 5-set win over TCU and then a 5-set win over Baylor. Charlie Furbringer is starting to gain a little bit more confidence. She had a huge service run to start the 5th set against TCU, but it certainly helps to have Franklin and Robinson. The two of them with 35 kills against TCU and 39 kills against Baylor. If you just keep on setting it to your pins, Mick, I think things are going to work out. I'm just not quite sure that Wisconsin is built to face Nebraska twice and go toe-to-toe with them. That's just my take.
Well, I would tell you that Wisconsin is lucky not to be 1-4. They should not have won that last match this week. The other team just made error after error to let them back in. It wasn't Nebraska or Wisconsin coming back. It was more the other team got so excited that they might beat them that they let them back in. So I think there's something that's not right at Wisconsin. It just doesn't feel right yet. It's just it's not all connected yet. And Kelly Sheffield's got to figure this out and get the right people next to the right people, because it just doesn't feel good yet. So when I say that, a lot of coaches look at things and they look at the numbers and everything, but it's a feeling you get from the teams that really gel. And that's the thing I enjoyed about Miami, is once they got the lineup that they put in there, it was a feeling. It wasn't that they had to perform extremely well. They just played off of each other's enthusiasm and each other's intensity. Wisconsin normally is like that, and this team this year has not shown that yet. So I'm sure they're working on that very, very hard.
All right, so we'll get to the 11 through 25, but I do want to go over a couple numbers. I know you guys are always clamoring for visual graphics and numbers from Nielsen ratings and stuff. So we got the news back from Fox, and Fox on the Texas-Wisconsin match dominated. Over 580,000 viewers, which is more than the opening day on ESPN2. Meanwhile, Stanford-Wisconsin, 487,000 on Labor Day, both more than the matches on ESPN2. Meanwhile, there was one person who got the email right away. I know a lot of people commented on YouTube, but we only were giving away one correct answer for the #1 viewed ESPN broadcast and it was last season, and it was Stanford versus Nebraska. So congratulations, you know who you are, because you are getting a sweet pair of 6 rotations gear. And I don't want to tease it because I like the surprise. I like whoever wins these little things. We're going to do another giveaway here in a week or so, and then we're not going to tell you what you're going to get, but we have a cool little angel partner that's helping us out and giving away some cool gear. Time for it, Mick. 11 through 25, and there are some shocking names that have dropped out of the top 10. And I think we could start with the Florida Gators. You lose to USF. You go from 10 to 13. Of course, you have the built-in excuse of no Kennedy Martin, no Alexis Stuckey. Ah, man, the Gators made 9 errors in the fourth set, and USF took it 25-23. And then Allie Kavanaugh goes back-to-back kills to win the match, 15-10. Her and Maria Andrade, who had 18 kills. How about USF? They backed that up, Mick, and they beat Ohio State in 5 sets the next day. The Gators also beat Ohio State as well.
Yeah, they're a good physical team. I got to see them also. I really think they can play if they can control their errors. Not so many gives. They can play with anybody. They just have to stay under control. They really get after it. Their coach likes to get them going. I like that team. I think they can be good by the end of the season. Like I said, they just have to calm it down. I wanted to comment on Florida, though. I think their ranking actually is too high. I don't think you can rank somebody on injured players that aren't in. I think you have to rank them on their body of knowledge. You don't do the team a good fair job if you rank them higher, because then the team thinks, well, we're really that good even though we're getting beat. I'd like to see Florida step up and fight with that group they've got, and then when Stuckey and Martin get in there, let's see what they really have. They can move up the charts pretty quick when they get those two back, maybe, but that's just an assumption, and they have to be able to do it. So I'd like the voters to really rank them on their body of work right now with the kids they've got.
I also feel like Kansas, a team at 11, happy that they're being disrespected because they're undefeated and they just took down Marquette, who of course lost 3 matches this week. But the Jayhawks are doing everything they're supposed to do. They're picked to win the Big 12 conference. I'm keeping my eye on them. Meanwhile, Oregon may be ranked a little too high too because they had an absolute threat with Grand Canyon University coming in, taking them to 5 sets. Oregon was able to eke out a victory. They sit at 4-1. Arizona State undefeated will match up with Nebraska. They're sitting right there in the teens as well. But, the Tennessee, BYU, Baylor, Minnesota hodgepodge at 16 through 19. Tennessee just swept UCLA, so they jumped from 17 to 16, but they've got a couple losses under their belt as well. Where do you feel BYU lost a tight one to Georgia Tech? Baylor, Minnesota are teams that, Baylor took Minnesota, beat them in 5. They lose to GCU in 5. They beat Wisconsin. They take Wisconsin to 5, but lose. Who do you feel like is the best out of these 3 teams, BYU, Baylor, Minnesota?
I think they're all in the same bucket. I think Minnesota's better. I think Minnesota's talent's better. I think they're playing a tougher schedule. I put Minnesota ahead of them. Georgia Tech, for some reason, can't seem to get it right, and BYU is not that strong. I watched Georgia Tech at BYU, and it's always tough to play at BYU, so you have to give Georgia Tech some credit coming out of there with a win. I think that's a big win for them, but honestly, they still seem to be not on the same page. That they'll go in spurts and be real good, and then they'll make some disastrous errors. So I think that's a work in progress for Michelle. She's got, I think, a group she likes. They're an older group. I don't think there's too many young kids playing out there. So I'm not sure what is keeping them from really getting in rhythm and really getting their system to run. I think Tennessee is better than we think. I think they will be somebody that you have to watch out for in the SEC because they're athletic, they can play. They again are the same. They go in spurts. They're really good for 6 or 7 or 8 points, but they have a tendency to give up points in numbers like 3 in a row, 4 in a row, and that's just depth because you lose all your momentum when you do that. If they can cut that down to only giving up 1 point at a time or only 2 max, I think they can stay with just about anybody. They have the talent.
Georgia Tech, Florida, Wednesday at 7 Eastern on ESPN2. That's a rematch of the NCAA tournament second round match that Georgia Tech eked out against the Gators in Gainesville. Houston and Texas will follow that. I love the amount of linear games that we are getting, especially the midweek ones. Tuesday, we also have Tennessee, Western Kentucky, SMU, Baylor. That'll be fun, as well as the Creighton, Nebraska matchup. All right, let's get to the 20s. And for the first time ever, we have a ranked team named TCU. The Horned Frogs have never been ranked in the history of the AVCA Coaches Poll. Meanwhile, Miami has never been ranked as high as 20 in a full season. They were ranked 11th in the 2020 fall season that had very few teams competing in it. Florida State had a big win, a big loss, a big win, a big loss. They dropped from 15 to 21 with the loss to Auburn. And I'm not too sure about Arkansas and Dayton yet. Those are teams that are undefeated and haven't quite taken on the opponents that I would love to see them take on. Of course, it's not Dayton's fault. They have not. They were not able to finish that game against Ohio State. But Mick, let's talk about TCU. You like them? They had a good 5-set weekend with Wisconsin, and also able to really have some fun, I think, in the whole Baylor weekend situation. They got to see some very top teams and come out with a top 25 ranking.
Yeah, and I think I was right about TCU. They're going to be good. They're going to be a top 25 team. They're going to do damage in the Big 12. You have to watch out. In fact, I think they could win the Big 12. You have to watch closely, but you've got also, I think I was right about Arkansas. I don't think they're as good as their ranking here. We want to see how they do in the SEC. I think I was wrong about Marquette. They're still struggling to get their system right. I really thought Florida State was better than what they did last week. So I was wrong about that. Western Kentucky, I was really wrong about. They seem to be out of the rankings and having trouble getting organized. But Baylor is one I was wrong about. I think they're better than I said last week. After watching them, they're just not pretty. They struggle with rhythm sometimes, but they got some big kids that hammer the ball. They play pretty good defense. They have competed well. So keep your eye on Baylor. They could also be somebody in the Big 12 that makes a difference.
Well, let's go through a couple of these notes here quickly. So Baylor had that 5-set win over Minnesota, 16-14. Like I said, fans who went to the weekend in Waco had as much volleyball as you can intake, because Wisconsin went to 5 with TCU, went to 5 with Baylor, Minnesota went to 5 with TCU, went to 5 with Baylor. TCU and Baylor both defeat Minnesota in 5. If you watch the end of that TCU Minnesota match, holy cow. Melanie Schaffmaster picks up a triple-double, which is the first for Minnesota in a couple decades. But TCU able to battle through and win that 5-set match in extra points. Exactly what this team needed after a tough loss in Lincoln, after a tough 5-set loss to Wisconsin. It was a Melanie Parra showcase with her 30 kills. And, TCU, they'll take on UCLA this upcoming Friday. That can be a showing for them to secure their spot. Meanwhile, Arkansas, they just haven't played anyone. So I'm not going to speak on Coach Watson's team yet. They have a couple standouts. Romani Thurman averaging over 3 kills per set. But it's just a small sample size. They're sweeping everybody. They're playing a bunch of bad teams. They did win a 5-setter against St. Mary's, but we'll see them take on Miami next Thursday, the 19th in Miami. So that could be a decent opportunity to see what they really have to offer. But, I think for the most part, we did a decent job covering everything. I want to say that SMU is right on the outside looking in. They're the number 26th team in the AVCA Coaches Poll. And then Auburn, UCLA, and then you get Marquette. Meanwhile, Georgia had a chance to jump in, but they had a tough 5-set loss to Washington, although the Bulldogs had 19 aces, which is pretty unbelievable if you ask me. Have 19 aces, 6 service errors, and lose. But resilience from Washington there. I talked about most of the matches that I'm excited for coming up this week. Mick, were there any that I didn't mention? Stanford Pepperdine could be a fun one on Wednesday. Oh, and Oregon BYU on Friday. That's in San Diego, so a bit of a neutral site there. Who do you give the edge to in Oregon BYU?
I have to say, I like Oregon's athletes. I really think they should win. Why they're not just destroying people, I don't know, because I think they have a good group up there. They're athletic. Collier is good. She's in her junior year, I believe. They have enough pieces to really hurt people. I'm waiting for them to actually get into the good matches and see how they respond.
Well, another fun week under our belt. Can't wait to talk to you guys all next week. We did get a bit of news, and this was not a surprise by any means, but we have locked in the Louisville Final Four match time. So if you are one of those people that likes to hit their schedules, Thursday, December 19th at 7 p.m., and then 30 minutes following that match, that'll be on ESPN. And then Sunday, they're doing the Thursday, Sunday once again, Sunday, December 22nd, 3 p.m. Eastern on ABC. That's the Final Four schedule breakdown. That's been our episode of Six Rotations. So happy that you've been with us. Hope you enjoy all week long. And for the winners of our giveaways, go ahead and tweet us any pictures of you guys wearing those absolutely comfortable, cool little gifts that you got for Six Rotations. Have a great day.